I was standing in the middle of my 200-acre ranch when the black police SUV rolled slowly up the dirt road. The air felt tight. My son, Evan, stood beside me, and I watched the color drain from his face. The officer asked if it was true he had tried to sell my $11 million ranch without my consent. I handed over the folder I had kept hidden for 3 long weeks. Evan fell to his knees, shaking, whispering my name. Before they took him away, he asked why I didn't stop him, and I said, "Because you needed to face this." Before I continue, please subscribe, and let me know where you're listening in the comments. Now, let me take you back to how all of this began. When I think back to that moment watching the police drive away with my son in the back seat, I realize the story didn't start there. It started long before, in quieter days when life felt steady. So let me take you back. My name is William Harrington, though most folks around here call me Will. I'm 62. I live alone on a stretch of land in Wyoming that feels more like an old friend than a piece of property. 200 acres of grass that moves like slow water, horses breathing gently in the early light, the smell of hay dust and morning coffee drifting through the open barn doors. This ranch, this life, I built it with my own hands. No inheritance, no shortcuts, just years of steady work. I run cattle. I lease a section of land to a local business. Over time, the land became worth more than I ever expected. People say it's valued at over $11 million now. But to me, it's simply home. I've been a widower for 10 years. My wife Anna passed quietly one winter morning. After that, the ranch felt too big, too still. But I stayed because I didn't know how to live anywhere else. I have one son, Evan. He's 28 now. I adopted him when he was small, long before he could understand what the word adopted even meant. He was mine from the moment I carried him inside our home. Anna adored him, and after she passed, I tried to pour everything I had into raising him right. But grief changes people, and it changed him in ways I didn't see coming. At first, Evan handled the loss by pulling away. Then, he started filling his days with noise, parties, friends who didn't care about him the way he thought they did, trips he couldn't afford, jobs he couldn't keep. Every few months he'd call sounding desperate, or apologetic, or angry, and almost every time it ended with him saying he needed money. When I said no, he disappeared, sometimes for months, sometimes longer. I told myself he would grow out of it, that he only needed time. But each year that passed made the distance wider. By the time he moved to Denver, we spoke less and less. I tried not to take it personally. I tried to understand. But it hurt all the same. Life on the ranch settled back into its slow rhythm. Early mornings, quiet afternoons, simple things that gave me peace. I thought maybe that was how the rest of my life would look. Just me, the land, and the memories I carried. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. It was Evan. His voice sounded soft, almost careful. "Dad, I need a small favor." I remember standing on the porch watching the sky turn gold. I thought it would be something easy, something I could help with, something that would bring us closer again. I didn't know that call was the first step toward everything that would happen later. The betrayal, the forged papers, the moment he looked at me with fear instead of love. But that comes soon enough. For now, this is where the story truly begins. I remember hanging up the phone that day, feeling a small weight settle in my chest. Evan's voice had been gentle, almost too gentle. And even though a part of me wanted to question it, the larger part, the part that still believed he might turn things around, told me to give him a chance. He arrived 2 days later. I spotted his rental car before he even stepped out. When he finally opened the door, he moved slowly, like he was tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. His shirt smelled faintly of alcohol. His eyes were ringed with dark circles, but he smiled. That sweet smile he used when he was little. "Dad," he said softly, "I missed you." Just those words, simple, warm. And for a moment they loosened something in me. I invited him inside. He hugged me a little too tightly, like he wanted to prove something. And when he pulled back, he said, the thing I had waited years to hear. "I want to get my life together." Maybe I should have looked closer. Maybe I should have heard the small shake in his voice. But I didn't. I told him to stay a few days, rest, breathe. I made dinner. He ate quietly, complimented everything, thanked me more than he ever had before. It felt almost normal, But the next morning, the first spark appeared. I was tending to the horses, brushing down a mare that had been restless all week. The barn was quiet. The light came in soft through the wooden slats. For a while I forgot Evan was even visiting. Then I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned, he was spinning the keys to my new truck around his finger. My Ford F-150, the one I had bought only a few months earlier. He leaned against the post, smiling like he meant nothing by it. "Dad," he said, "you don't really need this truck, do you?" His tone was light, but his eyes weren't. They were sharp, quick, calculating in a way I had never seen before. I chuckled, trying to keep things easy. "Son, that truck is my legs around here. I can't run a ranch without it." He nodded slowly, too slowly. Then he slipped the keys into his pocket and wandered off without saying anything else. A tiny moment, but it pressed on me all day, like a quiet warning. Still, I brushed it aside, told myself he was just asking without thinking, that he didn't mean anything by it. Parents do that sometimes. We explain away things we should confront. But the truth was already there, small, sharp, waiting. That night, Evan went to bed early. I stayed on the porch, watching the sun disappear behind the hills. The air was cool. The world felt steady. And yet, something felt out of place, like a thread had been pulled without me noticing. If I had known how that thread would unravel, if I had seen how fast things would break, maybe I would have done something right then. But I didn't, and the storm was already coming. I wish I could tell you that the uneasy feeling passed, that the next morning felt normal again. But it didn't. Something had shifted even though I couldn't name it yet. Evan walked around the house quietly, moving from room to room like he was inspecting things. He asked small questions, casual questions. Too casual. "Dad, how much is the ranch worth now, Dad? Do you ever think about retiring, Dad? What happens to all this? You know, someday." Every question felt like a gentle push against a locked door. Not enough to break it, just enough to test the hinges. I answered carefully, slowly, but even simple words felt heavy. By the time the sun broke over the pasture, I could feel tension hiding under the surface like something breathing just out of sight. Evan followed me around that morning. While I fed the horses, he leaned on the fence, kicking his boot against the post. I tried talking about simple things, whether old memories, plans for the weekend, but he always steered the conversation back to money, back to the future, back to the ranch. At one point he said it straight. "Dad, you're getting old. You should let me manage things. Make your life easier." I paused in the middle of pouring feed. His voice wasn't mean. It wasn't sharp. It was worse. It was certain. "This ranch is my life's work," I said quietly. He shrugged. "And it could be mine. You just won't let it." There was no anger yet, but there was something close, something simmering. He left before I could answer. Later that day, he started talking faster. He paced around the kitchen, swinging his arms, muttering under his breath. I watched him from across the table, wondering if something had happened in Denver, something he wasn't telling me. He finally snapped. "You're holding everything tight like it's treasure," he said, voice rising. "You have more money than you'll ever spend. Why not let me help run things?" His words felt like small stings, one after another. "Son," I said gently, "managing a ranch isn't just about money. It's about experience, patience, and responsibility." He scoffed. "Responsibility? You think I don't have that?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to shake the frame. It was the first break. The next morning the house was quiet. Too quiet. Evan wasn't at the table. He wasn't outside. He wasn't in the barn. When I stepped onto the porch, the space where my truck usually sat was empty. A hollow feeling hit me. I called Evan. He picked up on the second ring. "Where's my truck? I borrowed it," he said lightly. "Relax. Bring it back." Yeah, I will." But evening came, and he didn't. Instead, I received a message from the dealership. A simple line that made the world tilt under my feet. "Your vehicle has been sold." Sold. Not borrowed. Not moved. Not parked somewhere. Sold. I sat down slowly. The porch boards creaked under me. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger. Just disbelief. Evan had done reckless things before, but this, selling my truck without my permission, this was something new. I called him again. He answered breathlessly. "Dad, look, I needed the money. You're fine." "You have plenty." "Where's the money, Evan?" He hesitated just long enough to tell me the truth. "I used it. It's gone." "Gone." He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He didn't even sound sorry. He sounded annoyed. "You're rich," he snapped. "Why do you care?" I closed my eyes, held the phone to my ear, listened to the space between us grow wider than it had ever been. He didn't see my property as mine anymore. He saw it as his inheritance. Early. For the next few days, he walked around the ranch like he owned it. He opened drawers without asking. He checked documents on my desk. He made calls in the living room, lowering his voice when I walked by. Something was happening, and I didn't know what it was. Not yet, but I knew it wasn't good. The real blow came one afternoon while I was fixing a fence line. I heard voices behind me, unfamiliar voices. When I turned, a couple dressed in clean boots and city jeans were standing near the barn. "Can I help you?" I asked. They smiled politely. "We're here for the tour," the woman said. "The what? Your son told us the ranch will be listed soon. He said it's one of the best investment properties in the area." I stared at them. My hands went cold. "Who told you that? Your son?" "Evan." I looked toward the house. Windows open, curtains shifting with the breeze. Evan stood inside, laughing on the phone. Something inside me changed right then. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet shift, like a door closing. I apologized to the couple, told them there was no listing. They thanked me awkwardly and drove off their tires, kicking dust into the air. I confronted Evan as soon as the door shut behind them. He didn't hide it. "I listed the ranch," he said, as if he was telling me what he had eaten for breakfast. "I'll get a commission when it sells." My voice came out soft. Too soft. "Why, son?" His face twisted with something sharp, something bitter. "Because you owe me," he shouted. "You raised me, sure, but you never gave me the life I deserved. Everyone else I know has support. Money. A start. You kept everything locked away on this old patch of dirt." I stood perfectly still. He wasn't talking to me anymore. He was talking to the version of me he had built in his mind, the one who had wronged him, the one who had withheld something he believed he was entitled to. "This ranch is mine," he said. "It should have been mine already." His words sank deep, heavy, cold, and something in me, something patient and trusting, finally let go. Not anger, not revenge, just clarity. He wasn't going to stop. He wasn't going to learn by gentle talks or soft warnings. He needed something real, something firm. He needed to face himself. That night I lay awake listening to the wind move through the grass. The house felt too quiet. The air felt too thin. I watched the shadows on the ceiling and thought about every moment that had led us here. Every hug, every birthday, every mistake. I thought about Anna, what she would say, what she would beg me to do. But even her memory couldn't answer the question. I kept asking myself, how do you save someone who refuses to see the damage they're causing? How do you protect what you've built without destroying the person you love? The answer didn't come easily. It came slowly, painfully, like something rising from deep water. He needed consequences, real ones, the kind you can't argue with, can't talk your way out of, can't throw blame at. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to break him. But if I didn't act, he would break everything else, including himself. So when the sun came up the next morning, I made a decision. A quiet one, a steady one, the kind a father makes when love has to become something harder, something clearer. I would let my son walk into the mess he had created, and I would be there, not to stop him, but to make sure he finally saw the truth. The storm was no longer coming. It had arrived. I woke the next morning feeling older than I ever had, not because of my age, but because of the weight of what I knew I had to do. Evan moved around the kitchen like nothing had happened, humming softly, pouring himself coffee, tapping his fingers on the counter. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. He already believed the ranch was slipping into his hands, but the truth was shifting under him, and he didn't even know it. It all began with a phone call. I was in my office sorting through some old papers when my phone buzzed. The number was from the county land office. I almost ignored it, but something instinct maybe told me to answer. "Mr. Harrington," a gentle voice asked. "This is Laura, from the county. I'm sorry to bother you." "That's all right," I said. "Is something wrong?" There was a pause, a thoughtful one. I wasn't sure if I should call, but something came in yesterday. A preliminary transfer request for your ranch. My stomach tightened. A what? A transfer of ownership, she said quietly. Filed under your name, with your signature. I didn't speak. Couldn't. I checked it twice, she continued. Something felt off. The lines didn't match your past signatures. The ink looked rushed. I thought, maybe you should see it. She emailed me the documents. When I opened the file, I felt my hands go still on the desk. My signature was there, but wrong. Tilted, uneven, like someone had practiced it too many times. My son's fingerprints were all over it, even if no one else could see them. I could. Thank you, I whispered into the phone. You did the right thing. Mr. Harrington, she said softly, there's more. She sent a second set of documents, names I didn't recognize, companies I had never heard of, numbers that didn't add up. And then, the second twist revealed itself. The buyers your son listed? They're already under investigation, she said. They've been tied to small property schemes in the county, rural scams, land flips, fast cash. I sat back slowly, the chair creaking under me. Evan hadn't found investors. He hadn't found opportunities. He hadn't found partners. He had found people who used him. And in his desperation to please them, to impress them, maybe to belong to them, he had walked himself into something dangerous, something he couldn't get out of alone. I stared at the papers for a long time. They felt cold even though the room was warm. My son had not only tried to sell the ranch behind my back, he had involved people who knew exactly how to take advantage of someone like him. He wasn't leading anything. He was being led, and suddenly, something inside me settled. Quiet, sharp, clear. I didn't need to confront him. I didn't need to argue or shout. That would only push him deeper into the trap he had built. But if I stayed silent, if I watched, if I gathered everything, I could turn this whole situation around. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, but out of something harder. A lesson, a boundary, a line he needed to see. I forwarded all the documents to my lawyer Harper, an old friend, a calm man, the kind of person who understood truth without needing big words. He looked everything over. When he called me back, his voice was steady. Will, this is bad. I know, but he said it can be handled. And if you want to teach him something he'll remember, we can set the stage. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words settle. Set the stage. Let him reveal himself. Let the consequences come naturally. Not forced, not exaggerated, just real. When I hung up, the house was quiet again. Evan's laughter drifted faintly from the living room, muffled by walls and distance. A sad kind of laughter. A forced one. I walked toward the window and watched him. He was on the phone, speaking fast, pacing, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. He had no idea the ground beneath him was already cracking. He had no idea everything he hid was already in my hands. And he had no idea that the lesson he needed, the one that would finally stop him, was already beginning. The trap wasn't a cruel one. It was simply the truth, waiting for him to step into it. And soon he would. When I woke the next morning, the house felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just hollow the way a room sounds after someone steals something from it. Part of me expected Evan to burst in again, waving another stack of papers, demanding something else he thought I owed him. But he didn't. And I realized that silence was my advantage. I didn't confront him. I didn't yell. I simply stayed silent. That silence became the first step of everything that followed. I started with the simplest thing, evidence. Every message he'd sent me, every text dripping with impatience, every email where he pretended to advise me while pushing me a little closer to the edge, I saved them all. I printed copies, stored backups, and organized the files until the entire timeline of his behavior lay in front of me. But I needed more than that. That afternoon, Laura called. Her voice was low and steady, but I could hear fear woven through it. I shouldn't be doing this, she whispered, but your son filed every document with the county already. He's trying to put the land in his name before you even sign anything. I closed my eyes, letting that sink in. Even for Evan. That was bold. She sent everything, scans, filings, notes, timestamps, things he thought no one would ever question. She could have lost her job for it, but she still helped, because she remembered who I had been long before all this. When her emails arrived, the screen filled with proof of his impatience, arrogance, and entitlement, proof he had written himself into a corner without realizing. But evidence wasn't enough. Not for what I had in mind. That evening I drove into town. Past the worn brick buildings and the courthouse, steps over to the corner office, where Harper, my old lawyer, still worked. He looked older, white hair now instead of gray, but the moment he saw me, he stood up like he had been expecting me all along. "John," he said warmly, "it's been too long." He listened carefully while I laid everything out, the land sale document I never signed, Evan's forged filings, the pressure, the lies. I watched his expression shift from curiosity to disbelief, then to something sharper. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled. "We have enough to stop him immediately," he said. "We can freeze the filings, press charges, block the sale. Legally, you're safe." I nodded. "But that's not enough." Harper's eyebrows lifted slightly. "I figured you'd say that." He laced his fingers, studying me the way he used to when I was younger, and eager to fight battles I wasn't ready for. "We can go after him aggressively," he said. "But there's another option." I waited. "We can let him think he's winning," Harper continued. "Let him dig himself deeper. People like Evan tell on themselves when they think they've already won." I felt a slow, bitter warmth rise in my chest. For the first time in days, something made sense. "Then let's do that," I said quietly. Harper nodded, once firm and satisfied. "Then you'll need to play weaker than he thinks you are." That part was harder than I expected. The next time Evan came by, I stood in the doorway, letting my shoulders slump a little. I kept my voice soft, unsure. "I've been thinking," I murmured. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time to sell." His eyes lit up instantly. He almost smiled, almost. "I knew you'd come around," he said, relieved in a way that stung more than I wanted to admit. He took my arm like he was guiding me, but his grip was too tight, too eager. He spoke fast, like the plan was already done. "You'll get enough to retire comfortably, and I can take over the rest. The company, the equipment, it'll all be handled." I nodded slowly, letting a small tremble slip into my voice. "I trust you, son." He softened just for a moment. Then he kept talking, offering details I never asked for, revealing things he shouldn't have said. Money he'd already moved. Agreements he'd already made. Promises he had no right to make yet. And all the while I stayed quiet, letting the words spill out of him like he couldn't stop himself. He thought he'd already won. He thought I was giving up. He had no idea he was writing the final chapter himself. The real turning point came 2 days later. Evan met a realtor at a cafe just outside town. I knew because he texted me about it, or rather bragged about it, thinking I would be grateful. "You'll meet her soon," he wrote. "I'm handling the paperwork for you." So I drove there too, not to confront him, just to observe. I sat outside far enough that neither of them noticed me. I didn't need to, because the moment he saw the realtor, a woman dressed sharply, carrying a folder with my family land listed as if it were already hers, Evan puffed up like a man who believed everything belonged to him. I watched him lean forward, confidence radiating from him. "I'll be the legal owner soon," he said casually. "The old man won't fight it." My jaw tightened, but I kept recording. Every word, every careless admission. He laughed after he said it, an easy, self-satisfied sound I didn't recognize anymore. A sound that once might have come from a boy who trusted me, not from a man ready to erase me. By the time they shook hands, I had more than enough. More than evidence. More than motive. More than his own words. I had the final piece of what Harper needed. The final piece of what I needed. I walked back to my truck, the phone still warm in my hand. The late afternoon light stretched across the lot, long and thin, like a line being drawn between who I was before this and who I was becoming. Evan thought I was weak. He thought silence meant surrender. But silence was where the real work began. The morning Evan planned to finalize everything began with a strange stillness in the air. The kind that comes before a heavy storm, not loud, not dramatic, just dense. I felt it the moment I stepped into my office. The blinds were half closed, the light cut into narrow lines across the floor, and every breath I took felt weighted with the quiet truth of what was about to happen. I had arranged everything the night before. The officers waited inside my office, standing near the back where they couldn't be seen from the doorway. Harper sat at my desk, reviewing the folder of evidence for what must have been the 10th time. He wasn't nervous, just precise the way he always was, when preparing something that would change the direction of a life. When he heard me enter, he looked up and nodded. "You're ready," he said. It wasn't a question. I closed the door gently. "Let's finish this." Evan arrived exactly on time, a rare thing for him. He walked into the office with that practiced confidence he wore like armor. He didn't notice the officers yet. His eyes focused only on me and the stack of papers sticking out of his leather folder. "Dad," he said with a bright, rehearsed smile. I brought the agreement. I streamlined everything for you. Streamlined, that was his word for forgery. I sat across from him and allowed a small, tired nod, the same nod he expected from the weak version of me he had been speaking to for weeks. He took it as permission. He slid the documents across the desk, his movements careful, almost ceremonial. "Just sign here," he said, tapping the signature line. "It'll take 2 seconds." I didn't touch the pen. Instead, I looked at the page quietly, long enough for Evan to shift in his seat just a fraction. Then I pushed the papers gently back toward him. My voice stayed soft, steady. "Evan," I said, "whose signature is this supposed to be?" He frowned, confused at first. Then the confusion cracked. His eyes darted to the documents, to me, back to the documents. Color drained from his face so quickly I almost heard it. "Dad, it's you signed it. You don't remember, we went over this." Before he could finish that sentence, Harper closed the evidence folder with a quiet thud. Evan twitched at the sound. And then he finally noticed the officers behind him. He froze. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply handed the officers the neatly organized binder texts, emails, filings, recordings, everything he believed he had buried under charm and impatience. Harper pressed a button on a small speaker. Evan's own voice filled the room, calm and confident. "I'll be the legal owner soon. The old man won't fight it." Followed by, "He's confused half the time anyway. He'll forget signing anything. And then, once the land transfers, I'll take the rest. He can retire quietly." Evan's shoulders folded inward with each sentence like he was shrinking from the sound of himself. One of the officers stepped forward. His voice was firm, professional. "Mr. Evans' attempted fraud and forgery of an $11 million property is a felony. These recordings and documents are substantial evidence." My son stared at the floor, breathing unevenly. For the first time in years, he had nothing to say. No quick explanation. No charming spin. No strategic apology. Just silence. The officers asked if I wanted to press for immediate arrest. For a moment, the room felt unbearably still. I looked at my son, his hands trembling, his eyes glassy with disbelief, the weight of his choices settling on him like wet cement. A younger version of me might have demanded punishment, might have wanted to see him pay in the most literal legal sense. But what I wanted now wasn't fury. It was clarity. I met the officer's gaze. "No," I said quietly. "I don't want him arrested." Evan exhaled shakily, not relief exactly, but a desperate little gasp of hope. Then I continued. "I want a formal report filed," I said. "A full record of the attempted fraud." The officer nodded and wrote it down. "I want a restraining order. He is not allowed on my property anymore." Another note. "I want a financial investigation into all accounts he used in this process." More writing. "And I want a permanent block preventing him from attempting any property transfers under my name." The room felt colder with each request. Not vindictive, just final. The officers confirmed everything. Harper watched, silent but approving. And Evan, he stared at me like I had knocked something loose inside him. It wasn't his fortune I'd taken. It wasn't his freedom. It wasn't even the land. It was his credibility. No investor would trust him after this. No bank would risk working with him. No partner would sign a deal with a man under financial investigation. And no authority would ever accept a property filing with his name attached to mine again. It was the one consequence he couldn't charm his way out of. To him, it must have felt like I had ruined his life. But the truth was harsher, quieter, and far more honest. He had destroyed it himself. And all I had done was let the truth catch up to him. Evan left my office that day without looking back. His steps were slow, uneven, as if he didn't know where to place his feet anymore. And once the report was filed, everything around him began to fall apart, faster than he could hold it together. The first cracks came from the people he had trusted the most, the ones he used to brag about, the ones who promised him shortcuts and easy deals. The moment they learned he was under investigation, they cut him off. No calls, no messages, no support. They acted as if they had never known him. He tried to get back the money he had given them for that truck he wanted so badly, but they vanished. He learned the truth, the painful way they weren't friends. They were the kind of men who stepped away the second the ground shifted. Then came his job. The company called me, asking if the investigation was real. I didn't hide anything. I didn't exaggerate either. I simply confirmed the facts. By the end of the week, Evan had been let go. They told him he could reapply after the legal matters cleared. He knew that meant never. When the restraining order took effect, he had no choice but to leave the ranch. He packed his things in silence. Didn't argue. Didn't shout. He walked out as if the land no longer recognized him. I watched from the porch, not because I wanted to see him go, but because I couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. No relatives defended him. Not one. Every single person who once praised him for being ambitious suddenly spoke softly about poor judgment and bad choices. It was strange how quickly people changed sides when the truth became public. And me. I went back to my quiet routines, waking before sunrise, feeding the horses, checking the fences, listening to the soft creak of the barn doors. Life around the ranch returned to its calm rhythm, but the silence felt different now, heavier, as if something inside the land itself had shifted with him gone. I told myself I had done the right thing, that the truth had to come out, that lessons sometimes needed weight behind them. But even with all of that, my heart didn't feel victorious. It felt tired. It felt older. It felt like a part of me had been bruised in a way I didn't know how to name. And for the first time in a long while, the quiet didn't bring peace. 3 months passed quietly after Evan left the ranch. The days moved in a slow, even rhythm, the kind that settles around you when life finally stops shaking. I didn't expect to hear from him. I didn't wait for it. But one evening, as the sun was dropping behind the hills, I found a thick envelope in my mailbox. It was from Evan. The handwriting looked shaky, uncertain. I stood there for a moment, staring at my name on the front, feeling something in my chest pull tight. When I opened it, a long letter unfolded, page after page. It was the longest message he had ever written to me. He apologized for everything, for the lies, for the pressure, for trying to take what I built. He wrote that he finally understood how far he had gone, and how far he had fallen. I didn't respond right away. I needed time. I still loved him. Nothing could close that part of my heart, but love doesn't fix broken trust. Time and choices do. A week later I wrote back. My message was short. I told him he could return to the ranch, but only if he agreed to therapy and to a financial accountability program. No shortcuts, no exceptions. If he wanted to rebuild, we would do it the right way. He accepted. There was no argument this time, only understanding. A few days after that, I stood on my porch at sunset. The sky had that soft golden tint that seems to rest on everything it touches. I could hear the horses breathing inside the stalls, slow and calm. The wind moved through the grass with a gentle whisper, almost like it was reminding me that life keeps going even when the heart stumbles. In that moment, I knew I had done the right thing, not just for the ranch, but for Evan, for the man he still had a chance to become. Greed can turn someone you love into a stranger, and sometimes the only way to save them is to let them face the consequences they've been running from. If you were in my place, could you forgive your son? Thank you for listening. If this story stayed with you, please like, share, and subscribe for updates on the latest stories.